Hola. Hola, bona tarda. Bona tarda. Benvinguts a la xerrada al voltant de la il·lustració, que dividirem en dues parts, bàsicament. Una centrada només en la qüestió creativa de la il·lustració i l'altra més en qüestions més relacionades amb el sector editorial, la relació entre els il·lustradors, els agents i els editors. Aquesta xerrada forma part de les activitats que estem organitzant dins la missió per editors i agents internacionals, que l'Institut Ramon Llull organitza des de fa ja 10 anys. I aquest any, per primer cop, en col·laboració amb la Setmana del Llibre en Català. Així que estem molt agraïts perquè la setmana ens hagi permès introduir aquesta xerrada dins les seves activitats. També volia agrair al COAC per cedir-nos l'espai i a la PIC i a Il·lustre per ajudar-nos a estructurar aquesta xerrada. Per cert, la xerrada es retransmet via streaming a la web de la PIC. I bé, moltes gràcies a vosaltres per venir. Ara canviarem a l'anglès per deferència als nostres convidats. I would like to introduce our guests really shortly. We had over there Roseanne, works as an editor at the Children's Department at Editions Glenat. Glenat is a major independent publishing company. It publishes 600 new titles per year. Its catalog is divided into 4 parts: comic books, children's books, art books, and textbooks. And she especially enjoys working on non-fiction illustrated books. She's very thoughtful about the artwork and the interaction between illustration and text. Then we have here Daniela Gamba. She is in charge of the children's division at Feltrinelli Group. She oversees over 100 titles per year, from picture books to YA novels, fiction and non-fiction. 80% of Feltrinelli's new releases are translations, while in Gribaldo is slightly over 50%. Then we have Goksun here. He is an agent at Kalem Literary Agency, one of the most important agencies in Turkey, and also the organizer of the International Literary Festival Istanbul Tanpınar. She's in charge of the children's division and works mostly with illustrated titles. And then here Stephen Geck is the publishing director of the children and teen division in Source Books. He oversees the acquisition and publication of 2 imprints, Jabberwocky and Fire, and his department publishes around 100 titles per year. As I said before, the talk will be structured in 3 different parts. Let's see what it comes out of it. And first we will start with illustration trends according genres and countries. So we are here assuming that illustrated books are an important feature in your market, but we would like to start this conversation about asking what would be the most popular illustrated genre or book format in your country. Maybe the picture book, illustrated non-fiction, maybe another one. I don't know who wants to start.
Well, I don't have access to the numbers of the educational part of children publishing, but I'm sure that, of course, they are the most important part of the market, school books. I'm not in charge for that, so I think that among the fiction and more dedicated to entertainment, picture books are growing in the last years in Italy, and picture books and I would say collection of stories and fairy tales. Well, this is the most the part of the market, and the children's books market in Italy, just to have an idea, is 23% of the total books market. So just for you to have an idea, compared to the Spanish one, that I think is something more like 36% or something like that.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here, and I should say that I'm not really used to speak in front of people, but I'm really happy to be here, because when Carlos told me that there'll be a session, thank you. There'll be a session with illustrators, I'm really excited, because the illustrations are my main motivation to sell the book in Turkish market. So that's why I'm here. When you asked me illustrated books, I understood that picture books. Picture books are really new things in our market. The most common genre is middle grade books because the childrens can choose their books, or they can buy the books which is recommended by their teachers, and the parents, they don't need to think of which books they are going to buy. They don't care. They do care, but they don't need to go to the bookshop with their kids. But nowadays it's changing because the parents are more educated now, and they try to read the books, the picture books with their kids. This is the main thing why the picture books are becoming more popular, and it's going to be more and more, I believe. It's not like a trend. There was a gap in our market, let's say in Turkey. I'm going to share my experience, my observation about Catalan literature, Catalan children's books. But in Turkey, as I told you, the main part is middle grades. There was no picture books, maybe the board books, because that babies, toddlers, let's say, they need something to learn, something new at that age. But picture books range is very different from other range, because they have a huge imagination, and you have to feed them, or you don't need. Maybe you don't feed them. How can I say? If you don't do anything, there'll be nothing. But when you put something on that range, on that picture book range, it is you get more and more every day, every year. The illustrators care more their artwork on that books. Maybe 10 years ago it was not like that. They were just doing very simple things. If it's written a cat in the text, they draw a cat, simple cat. That's all, nothing more. But nowadays the illustrators in Turkey, they are becoming more professional, but it's not enough right at the moment. Can I share my feelings about Catalan illustrations? We had a session today with an editor, with the owner, La Galera, Yolanda. I couldn't remember the surname. Yeah, okay, Yolanda. She told us about the history of children's literature in Catalan, and also the history of children literature in the world. What I found is you have a really strong tradition, illustration tradition, and I don't know if you feel strong enough right now, but you have a very amazing artwork, I think. I think it's okay.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of, one statistic. The picture book market is very healthy and robust in the United States. From January 2014 through September of 2015, picture book sales were up 12.6%, which was really terrific. And for the last several years, board book sales have been up 20% every year over the year before that. So just from a business standpoint, it's a very, very healthy category. But we've also seen the graphic novel area, which I think for 15 years people have been talking about this is the next thing, and that has finally really happened in the United States. So illustrated books are, I think, at a peak right now in our country.
Hello. In France, I work at Glénat Edition in France. Sorry. And in France, illustrated book for children is a very, very big market because most of editors know that children's markets it's benefit to their house. This sector doesn't know the crisis. So every publisher in France wants to go in the children books publishing. And it's going up years after years. Closer. Do you hear me? Sorry. And the opportunity to publish all over the world is rising too, and it's very I don't know the word. We open to the world our publisher, but the foreign publisher, we open the markets all over the world. I'm sorry, my English is not very French. In France, we have a history in children's book literature with the Perrault, with the story of the Père Castor, and Babar and Tintin, and we are proud of it and would like to improve this culture. Thank you.
Okay. Once you have established that picture books are an important feature in your market, and even in Turkey, even though it's a new trend, how would you describe the illustration for children books in each of your market? Maybe it's more artsy, more trendy, maybe more comic-like. And if you basically work with local illustrators, or do you also usually cooperate with illustrators from other parts of the world?
How many questions?
Yeah, well, let's start with the first then. How would you describe the style of the illustration?
Well, I have to say that I wouldn't find a common line that could be defined the Italian style in the illustrations. If you look at the bestseller list, unfortunately, the first 10 places are often taken by licensing titles, so it's not, it's not inspired art, even if, of course, the designer of the TV series can be a genius, but it's not what we are speaking about, I think. And I'm proud to say that in the last year we had the first not licensing title in the bestseller list for children. It was a collection of Aesop's tales. And the illustrator was picked out from the wall at Bologna Book Fair. There is the wall where all the young illustrators put their cards, and my colleague at the graphic department took many cards, and we chose this guy, and he was his first book. So we are very proud to have launched him in the Italian market, and that his book is among the first 20 in the last year sales of children. So, and what was the other second one?
Well, let's stay with this one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So I would say, well, we don't have a style. Depends a lot on the target. If it's for very young children, then we have, for example, I could mention Agostino Traini, very like the mucca mocha, very, very simple shape with strong dark line. And of course, for these board books. While for picture books, we have many different styles, more, I would say, like painting style, materic sign, and but also different techniques. So I think it's too different to say that we have a style. Yeah.
As I told you in the first question, there's not really a specific tradition in Turkey, but I think it's because of the Islamic roots. It was not legal. I mean, legal to draw, in a specific way. But it's a very recent new. Let's say it's to illustrate something, to draw something. It's a very modern thing for us. For example, the universities, fine arts are really maybe 15 years old. It's very young to create a mainstream illustration style. As an agent, I have a chance to know different countries' illustration styles and their books, like Northern style, Nordic country style, Francophone style, German style, let's say Arabic style. I mean, there are lots of. I can imagine. I can. When I look at a book, I can tell you more or less. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I can tell you this book is from, let's say, Germany, because they have a mainstream style. This is good. There's advantages and disadvantages about this. In Turkey, we don't have that kind of style, but it's developing right now, and the new illustrators are coming up, and they are becoming an inspiration for the new ones. But there are lots of obstacles to still. There are lots of obstacles to create a mainstream illustration style. It's a publishing sector's problems, I think. The money that illustrators earn from the illustration, their careers, they don't have how can I say? It's very hard to convince themselves to go further their career in the children's books, let's say. They do other jobs. They illustrate the children's books as a hobby. Just, but it's very hard if it goes like that. If it's really hard to create a new style. I mean, I don't want to say that there must be a strict style in every country. No, it's not really good. Every single illustrator must have own style, but also, how can I say, it's a long history. There must be a mainstream, and then the illustrators must find their own way. It's it takes time. So we are really at the beginning in Turkey in this process. I'm really hopeful. Yeah.
One of the things about having a very healthy picture book market in the U.S. is that we have a broad spectrum of illustration style that's very successful. There is fine art, there is experimental art, etc. But it's funny when you say, I will say about the U.S. market, if you don't know this, and I brought some of the books, but we like bright colors. It really is,
Yeah.
it is a reality about the U.S. market. We have bright primary colors. This is what does best in the U.S. And it's funny because I go to the Bologna and Frankfurt book fairs, and often I'm saying, and Goxon, you should the colors are too muted.
Yeah. This is very.
that we just, I think it's a U.S. culture, and sometimes it makes me very sad because I would like to see more of this style of art in the U.S. But at the same time, right now, on my picture book list, I'm working with illustrators from Italy, Germany, Spain, Australia, and the United Kingdom, and Ireland. So we have a pretty diverse group of illustrators who, and our picture book area is growing, so we're expanding more and more.
It's very new, right?
Yeah, it is new. Yeah, I think the U.S. market has been very self-centered and looking at itself and just hiring U.S. illustrators for a long time. But I think things are loosening up a little bit, and I also will say that digital has changed things. And I remember when, it was only physical portfolios that we could see, but because everything is out there now, digitally, we can look at everybody's websites from around the world, and that's really opened up the ability to hire illustrators from around the world.
I'm okay with you about the international vision of the website. You go to see. You want to work with a foreign illustrator. You can contact by email. In France, we have I think we have a style. But we can work with foreign illustrator. In my company, we don't do. It's new, but I hope we can open this to foreign author and illustrator, because it's an open-minded company, and we published last year a Catalan illustrator, Olga Capdevila, with her album Con el ojo de la I, and it's a beautiful work. She adapted for the French market her illustration, and I think it's a possibility to open this trend to France. We also work with the UK for non-fiction books for English illustrator. We bought rights, but I contact an English illustrator, and he told me if you want to work with me, it's very. I think the world is at our door. So I'm welcome.
Well, thank you. Well, it seems that it's been changing lately. This because before it was really hard for lots of illustrators to travel because usually it was more a segmented market, and if you didn't look like the style of a specific market, it was difficult. I just had a few conversations with illustrators that they said to me that they needed to change their style in order to be published in the States, for instance, and become less artsy and be a little bit more comic, like, and even some Asians and publishers from Asia, for instance, they said that European illustration is too depressing, and they're looking for something like brighter as well and happy endings, things like that. So it's good that it seems that it's changing a little bit, and thanks to internet and websites, things like that, markets are more open to hire new voices, new illustrators. Would you say it's the same in Italy and in Turkey or not? Are you usually cooperating with foreign illustrators as well there?
Well, to cooperate when you have a project, an original project, for an Italian publisher is quite difficult as we would need the illustrator to understand Italian. So I can say that until now in my career it has never happened, except for a cover when I was at Salani and I asked an Israeli, but it was a cover of a book from Israel, so he could do it. And while I look for foreign illustrators as authors. For example, I publish many books from other countries, and for example from Catalonia we publish 4 titles by Anna Llenas that is very much appreciated in Italy, and her books are bestseller in our country now. And books by Sib Postuma from Holland, and now Susanne Rotraut-Berner from Germany. So we are open, our catalog is open to foreign titles, illustrated books. And so I'm looking for authors with the capital A.
I think Turkey is one of the most who published acquired titles. I mean, foreign titles from all over the world. When I compare with France and Italy and even USA, I think we acquire more titles from abroad, and the titles, the foreign title styles, really change our styles. I mean, as I said, there's disadvantages and advantages not to have a mainstream style. The advantages, I think, our market really open to every kind of style. And as an agent, let me tell you more about my position in Turkish publishing market. I am an agent. I'm working for foreign publishers, and I try to find a Turkish publisher for their titles. So I have to know which title is suitable for which publisher in Turkey. So there are lots of styles, and there are lots of editors here, and I have to find the best place for them. Let me show you a couple of examples that I sold recently, and I feel proud that I have a chance to introduce this kind of works. For example, this is Kobi Yamada's book. What do you do with the problem? What do you do with the idea? There are 2 titles from him. I think he's a very extraordinary example from USA, don't you think?
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit darker style. And the Turkish publisher is, let me say, he's a bit conservative, let's say religious. And before he acquired this and published this book, he mostly published, very simple style. His main mission is to tell, his main care is the context, not the illustrations. But nowadays, he's a good example for me that how the publishers has changed their mind. They changed their mind. The illustrations are really, really important right now. And this kind of illustration, I don't think it was for him, but now he's doing really good job with this, and he's really happy with this book. And so I think that this is my main example that the publishers are changing right now. And if you give more different styles, if you give more different illustrations, they are accepting. They want to see more and more every day, new styles. Yeah, that's all for me.
We also talk about how new technologies have helped illustrators to travel into different markets, and the importance of, for instance, having a website so they can, you editors and agents can check out their work. Talking about new technologies as well, are you considering other formats besides paper? Do you think that multimedia books, augmented reality, other kind of formats offer new possibilities to illustrators? Are you considering working in such a format, or are you going to stick with paper?
Well, we've actually, we have a very digitally forward-thinking publisher, and she started a program 5 years ago called Put Me in the Story, which are digital books that are personalized. And we have also done augmented reality. I think the one thing that I haven't seen happen in the United States was there was talk several years ago about iPads. People would be reading their books only on iPads, but I think we all know now that the tactile experience of reading a picture book just can't be equaled from reading on an iPad, and it just hasn't happened in the United States. And it's also interesting that now a lot of kids in schools, they get an iPad instead of textbooks, and they do all of their reading, all of their fictional reading, all of that off an iPad, but we're not seeing them then become ebook readers. They're going right back to reading physical books. So we're certainly open to things in the illustration side, and we did augmented reality. We've done specifically digital books. It hasn't turned into a big business for us, like from my perspective, but we're not close to anything.
About format, you mean digital or
Augmented reality or interactive.
I'm very old school for this. I love books, the objects, and I like to go in bookshop and see what it's made. I don't read lots of books on iPad. I think we work on laptop and computer all the day, and so I like to have an object in my hand, and if it's and the artwork, I think the artwork is very important. So the print, the production, the work on the color, it's very important for me. So I don't really, I'm not very in the ebook or digital or reality. Sorry.
That we don't have resources and technologies to produce app for children. We looked into it for a while, but then we concluded that it wasn't the case. And I haven't seen any other publisher experimenting so much in this field. But there were born some publishing reality dedicated to app for children, so they do only digital. We are staying on the paper. We sometime, as we always publish ebooks for our fiction list, we try sometimes to publish a digital version of the picture books, but it's difficult because you cannot scroll the pages with the pictures, so you need really a complicated technique, so the only thing we can do is PDF. But sometimes we put on sale on the online shops also the picture books. Yes.
Again, our market is not developed yet, but there are some visionary publishers nowadays. They are acquiring ebook rights of the books. What I believe is in children's part, it is still hard to convince the parents to buy the tablets for their kids. It is still doesn't seem that it is good for the children, so they don't really use that kind of stuff.
Well, there are more questions about the kind of the style of illustrations, creative process, and so on. But I would like to move on to the second part of the talk that we said before, that it would be focused on the relationship between the illustrator, the agent, and the publishers. And the first question would be, when an illustrator manages to contact you directly, what would you prefer, to review the portfolio, or usually when he's a foreign illustrator, you prefer to have like a closed and finished project to consider?
It depends.
Well, if it's a finished project, it means that there is also text.
Yeah, it could be text as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. While this is a concept, and
Well, yes. Well, when I receive only the text for a picture book, I always say, please send me the full project and then I will consider it, because picture books the pictures are the main part, I think. So, so if they send a portfolio, for me it's very nice, and I just to be technical, I prefer to receive low resolution PDF, not to download for 1 hour heavy portfolio, because I have other things to do, and so I could miss that, just to, yes.
It depends of the project, I think. By mail, it's... I went to Bologna 2 years ago, and I've met some of illustrators of APIC, and I made a selection. I saw illustration and portfolio, and say, I like this one, and I like this kind of picture, and it was. When I come back to Paris, the APIC illustrator sent me lots of mails, and I'm sorry I didn't answer to your to your mail, but it's in my files, and when I think of something for a project, I it's a portfolio, a big file. So I like to receive the portfolio by mail. Why not by post too? It's very interesting to to discover on print.
Sorry, Steve. That is related to that because another question that we had in mind was if you can evaluate the portfolio or project of an illustrator only digitally, or do you usually also need to check out it in paper to be sure if you want to or not acquire the project and the book?
I would say that while we like portfolios and we like mailings, just something to know that's happening in the United States for designers is a lot of the publishing houses have now gone to very open concept work areas, and people don't have offices really much anymore. The people at HarperCollins the designers sit at tables right next to each other with their monitors. And I'm only saying this, they don't have filing cabinets and things like that anymore. This is just a fact of what's happening in the U.S. So there's no place to really store a lot of things. But I think mailing something is a very good idea, having the physical as well as the visual. But I will say for us, in terms of hiring an illustrator, we really do now look at agencies and we look at their portfolios online. We were talking about this earlier today, that if I have a picture book manuscript, I have an idea of what I might want. Our designer will pull together different portfolios that he discovers online. We sit around and discuss them. If we do like someone's work, we might ask them to send us a sample from a character study or something like that so we can see physically what it looks like. So I will say too that I think it does help to have an agent. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here. I'm sorry, and I'm done speaking. I would say I'm not a designer. I get probably 10 mailings a day from illustrators or from art agencies, and I'm not the person really making that decision, and I can forward them on to the designer, but I am not keeping huge records. I have 120 manuscripts a week that come into me, so that's my job as an editor. So I think having an agent who our designer can go to say, I've got this project, can you tell me if these people are free? The reality is we are working in such a tight time crunch that to be able to have an agency that we can approach and say, I'm interested in this person, I'm interested in this person, what's their schedule like? It kind of cuts to the chase, as opposed to trying to reach out to individual people's websites. We're busy.
Unfortunately, there are no illustrators agency in Turkey. I was asking to Carlos if there is any in here. Maybe there are some, but they also do represent the author's rights. But what I believe, and I feel that the sector, all over in international scene, the sector needs the good illustrators agent right now, because the illustrators, the good agents, I'm really talking about an agent's perspective. Maybe, the good illustrators could think that, why do I need an agent? Because I know every publisher in the sector, but why should I put a middle person in between me and the publisher? But it is really important. I think it's really useful because the agency, the good agency, must know which editor needs when and what. The important thing is, when do they need what? Something like that. So I don't know if I explain good, but every time their needs change, the editors' needs change, and you have to follow them up. You can't be, you don't have a, you shouldn't be shy. I mean, as an agent, I have to keep asking, you know, what are you thinking about this? Did you see my last email? And, you know, you can't be an agent if you are shy. So they have to follow your work on behalf of you, and they have to find the best place and in the right time. I mean, it's a matchmaking thing, you know, right thing and right time. So unfortunately, there's no illustrators agency in Turkey, but I'm really looking for it. There will be at some point, and it will be very successful, I believe, when the illustrators are ready for it. They are now becoming better and better every day, but at some point there will be a good agency, and they will that agency, that illustrators agency, will take care of their rights and their works.
For the first question about meeting in person the illustrator or receiving the portfolio, I think we prefer to receive the portfolio by email, and then if we are interested in working with the illustrator, we usually ask for a meeting in person to...
Yeah. Well, what I meant is if you need the physical copy of the portfolio.
No.
No.
No, we don't need the physical copy. And for the first sight, of course, we say, we could be interested, please send us the dummy, because we want to understand deeper the project. And so we usually, together with the dummy, we meet the illustrator. And as for the agents, it's something that is going to grow in Italy. We have a problem that I think in France you don't have anymore. That illustrators are often, I'm speaking on the side of illustrators now, not of the side of the publishers, because they're not considered authors. To speak frankly, they don't receive royalties often. They're paid with a forfeit. And so usually when an illustrator has an agent, it means he wants royalties, because the agent defends the rights of the illustrator. But this happens usually in Italy when the illustrator is already famous. So if he's never published before, and he presents himself to a publisher with an agent and asking for royalties, it's very, unless he's a genius with a lot of lights, I think it will be difficult he get a commission, a work to do. Well, it's sad, but it's changing, and I think that, as I was saying before, the picture book market in Italy is growing, and also the attention and the importance given to the illustrators.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned the royalties and the flat fee, the forfeit, usually happens, if I'm not mistaken, it's when you acquire the rights of one book through an agent, they usually get royalties, but the problem is when they get commissioned to the one book is when the flat fee comes in. Is that right?
No,
it's like it's a difference when a literary agent sells the rights of one book to one foreign publisher, or the other circumstances when it's the foreign publisher that commissioned directly to the illustrator one project. In the first case, probably the illustrator could get royalties, but in the second case, probably it's going to be a flat fee. Is that right? Or,
When you say foreign publisher, what you mean?
I mean, an illustrator from Catalonia just does one book, and his book or her book is published here, and then the agent just sells the rights of this book to Feltrinelli.
Okay.
Then usually the illustrator might get royalties. But when it's Feltrinelli that contacts directly the illustrator, probably it's going to be a flat fee. It's going to be different.
Feltrinelli contact directly the illustrator and commission him a work.
Yeah.
Well, yes, also because it means that idea comes from the publisher, and it's not an idea from the illustrator, because we are asking him to work for us. So there is a kind of, the intellectual property. So the inspiration isn't coming from, so there is a reason for that. Also, if you want to find just justify the behavior in the editorial business. Sometimes, if it's for example, an illustrator has not been published anywhere and come with a project to the publisher, full finished project ready to be printed, and we love this project, and the illustrator asks for royalties. Of course, if he's offering us something, he's done, and if we want that, we have to accept the conditions he asks. So it's different.
Yeah, all right.
Should I show it with an example? We had an idea, this is a how to catch a series which started with how to catch a leprechaun, because St. Patrick's Day is very popular, but it isn't really something you buy gifts for. And we said, what if we did a paper overboard hardcover, and we sold out every copy we printed and got on the New York Times bestseller list. And we created that concept, so we did commission an illustrator, and we paid them a flat fee. And now it's turned into a series, and I think we're on the 10th book right now. But that was we conceived it, we thought of it. But this is an example of Charlotte Zolotow, the great children's editor and writer, had this whole collection of poetry, and I went through and pulled together a bunch of her poems about seasons. But I really love Tiffany Beek's illustrations, so half the royalties are going to the late author and half the royalties are going to the illustrator. And I very much always give 50-50. I think there's a whole other discussion about what the splits should be.
So there's no standard?
The standard in the U.S. is pretty much 50-50. For if it's a non-commissioned thing, half the royalty goes to the illustrator and half goes to the author. That's pretty much the U.S. standard.
You illustrator, and you write, so in France there is a charte des auteurs et des illustrateurs who is promoting their work, because they aren't are recognized as in the literature, adult literature. The royalty are less yes. And it's a discussion with the author and illustrator at the beginning of the project. And if we buy rights of a foreign illustrator, and if we have to adapt the illustration, we pay the illustrator.
Well, then just to summarize, we would say that in order to find an illustration, you use internet, websites are pretty important. You also go to international book fairs and you actually look for illustrators there. And maybe you are missing here in the Catalan publishing sector illustration agencies That do you think that if more Catalan illustrators had or were represented by illustration agencies, they would have more chances to be commissioned from abroad and more chances to be published beyond their market, or not?
It depends. As I was saying before, and as she was saying, the media of the agent often means the illustration will be more expensive because you have to pay the service of the agency. So of course it depends on the project you're working on. If it's a big project and you have a big budget, of course it could be useful, but I think it could be useful especially if the agent helped the illustrator with the language. I mean, if the agent give a service of translation, for example, of the text, say, okay, if you are looking for an illustrator, I think that for this book this could be, but I mean, I don't know. As the language, according to me, is the biggest obstacle to collaborate with a foreign illustrator, because he would need to understand Italian. If the agent found a way to fill the gap, could be a way, a solution.
But I kind of had a question because I find now that so many of the agencies represent people from around the world. So not strictly a U.S. agency, only represents U.S. people. I know I'm seeing MB tomorrow, and she represents people from South America and Eastern European and Italy and the U.S. And I'm finding more and more that agencies, Bright Agency, they have worldwide clients, and it actually allows me to, because we had a book specifically that we're looking for with a Latin theme, I can go to her, and this person is a U.S.-based agency, but she has several Latin American clients, and she's been able to help me tremendously. So I would hope that the Catalan illustrators can find some of these agents to represent them throughout the world.
Maybe if there's an illustrator agency, I think they should focus on to make the illustrators to be well known in his or her country first, and then they can focus on the international scene. Otherwise, I don't think it would work to try to reach the international publishers first to publish your works. I think it takes time and it takes your efforts, but the first thing that, and if I were an illustrator, I wish I could do, I wish I could be, but I should try to be focus. I should try to focus on my own country to publish more and more titles, and to work with the best authors in the country, and then I try to find a way to sell those books rights in abroad. This is how in Turkey the publishers they don't really consider the foreign illustrators' work directly. It really takes time for them and lots of things they have to do. But when they acquire a book, it's really easy, and it's a little bit cheaper than to create the book in our country. For example, it's to give you an idea, the illustrations fee in Turkey, when the publisher wants to acquire a book from abroad, it's changed from, let's say, 50 euros till 350 euros. Yeah, It depends on the negotiation. So it's a flat fee. They don't, the deal based on, I mean, the author takes the royalty, but illustration is a part of the fee. I mean, it's a fee, one-time fee. But I don't know how they share, for example, okay, the Turkish publishers acquired a book and they paid us the advance and the illustration fee, and I transferred it to the foreign publisher, let's say Catalan publisher. I got my commission from the advance, but I don't take any commission from the illustration fee. But I don't know, when I transfer the illustration fee to the publisher, do they take any money from the illustration fee? They do.
Balance with the fee, the
Oh,
part
right.
you took
Okay.
from the fee.
Okay.
But, sorry, I just add, I think that if a Catalan illustrator want to enter in a market like the Turkish one, that it's not very developed in the illustration part, or in the Italian one that it's not so developed in the illustration part, it's better to present a ready project. And if it's already published by a Catalan or any other foreign publisher, better. But when the market, the illustrated books market was not so, as developed as now in Italy, many good illustrators started to work in France, not in Italy, because the illustrated books market in France was so wide and welcoming. And so it happened to me that to buy books and rights for books published in France, to have them in Italy, and the illustrator was Italian. So it can happen.
I don't know if you want to add something else. I've just checked the hour, and maybe if you don't want to add anything else about this matter, maybe it's time for you to ask a few questions to them. Just please feel free. It means that you've been really, really good.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I was very surprised when you said, or you've been saying, that the Italian market is not such a developed market.
Well, compared to the French one, I always have a look at the French market for illustrated books, and now it's changing in the last 10 years. But I'm working since 20 years, and at the beginning, picture books didn't sell. Perhaps they were published, but the market was not ready for them. It was a very, very narrow part. Now we start to have bestseller in the illustrated books part of the market, and it's something new of the last 10 years in Italy. And yes.
And in general, do you think parents or the buyers of these illustrated books, are they tending to be more sophisticated in the illustrations they buy for their children, or the illustrated books they buy for their children, or do you think they're getting more simple, more Walt Disney kindly, or more? Are they tending, or is it not moving? Is it staying in the same percentage than it was 20 years ago?
I think it's really changing, and it's becoming more sophisticated, especially the effect of social media. All those beautiful pictures with coffees and the books, and it really affects. They really looking for the artistic styles, and in a beautiful story, with a beautiful story. But I believe the illustrated, they expect more sophisticated books, illustrated books?
I would say it's pretty broad in the U.S. Certainly very commercial books, as I said earlier, but also very sophisticated and beautiful books. I think what's really interesting and changing in the U.S. is so many more books are being bought online, and they're being bought by recommendation. There's a statistic that when someone now makes a book purchase in the U.S., they have heard about the book or had an impression 3 to 4 times before they actually buy the book. And that may be the physical experience in the bookstore, but more and more it's becoming the recommendation of peers and such. So whether the art style is driving that, I don't know necessarily. It's less about the person going into a bookstore and reading a book and having that experience and walking out and buying it. Now it's more, what is social media telling me about this?
Yeah, it's a bit I think class. It depends on the class. Let's say in Turkey, picture book buyers who buys the picture books mostly upper middle class families. So they are mostly educated. They are able to interpret the story in the book. It's really hard. I can't really tell the story to a kid, but parents should do. But it's really a skill, I think. It changed with the education. Yeah, that's what I think.
I think I don't know if I work if it's because I work in this publishing sector. I'm very sensitive to the artwork. I think in France there are two sides: sophisticated book and mass market, and I think that complete each other. It's we do both until it works. So it's my opinion. I don't know if it's true in the real market, French market. I published for the end of this year 2 books, and it's not digital. It's real painters, and I can assure you it's a very big pleasure to work on original picture. We find the work is very I don't know the word in English. Hein? En quoi? En français. En français, oui. C'est très fin. On voit le travail. Je sais pas. It's delicate. It's very delicate. I think it's in digital, in numeric. It's another kind of work for another public. This illustrator is a painter, and the colors are not the same in real, and it's a pleasure to find her artwork in reality. I hope you understand me.
Well, I will say, though, that this book was done with watercolors, but then were scanned in digitally, and she did some other work to it. And I've been doing this so long that I keep talking about the artwork coming into the designers, and people keep going, digital, Steve, digital, it's coming in digitally. Because I remember when everything came in as physical art, and now everyone that we're working with seems to find a way to make it digital, and also working internationally too. I think that's another reason people are working more digitally, so they can send us the digital files. But within that, people are collaging, and I mean, I've seen everything being done and transformed into a, yeah.
I saw Slovenian author and illustrator.
Yeah.
She was sewing the picture book, and I don't know what is she doing, but the main thing is she's sewing the story.
Yeah, and there's someone who makes diorama boxes, but she still photographs it, scans it in, and it comes in as a digital file. So I can't say there's one thing that's necessarily more popular than the other. I think it's actually a very healthy time for people working in lots of different ways.
Hello. Here in Spain, the picture book, the picture book market has been growing up in the last years. But now, when you talk to people from this market, they used to say that it's been publishing too many picture books now at this moment. So it seems like picture book has a very short life. This just goes out and then just more. Yes, disappears. So do you also think in your country it's been publishing too many picture books now at this moment?
I think picture books, the publishers always, I don't think if in Turkey, maybe also in Catalonia, I think every publisher has a room for picture books, beautiful picture books. If they say that, we publish too many picture books, we don't want to see, we don't want to consider anymore, but picture books as a range, it's already settled in the world, and every publisher has a room for it. I don't think there's too much titles in the market in USA, in Turkey, in Catalonia. I think it's still it needs to be developed, and there should be more and more titles.
Yes, a lot of picture book in France. But as I tell you at the beginning of the discussion, the market is growing and growing, and every publisher in France has a children's book department, and the market is growing. So as we publish, yes, some books dies very quickly. I'm very sorry for it, but some of have a long life. It's market law. I don't know. So I hope. I don't know what to say.
I don't think it's like a coloring book trend. No. It's stopped now, but it's in picture books. It's not like that. There was a gap, and it's growing fast. Yes, and it's maybe the publishers are publishing maybe less than maybe 1 year ago, but
I'm
be always there.
Being from the United States and having done this for a long time, and I spent a good chunk of my time as a book buyer, managing a bookstore, and I used to just complain, there are too many books being published, So I've heard that for a long time, but I think that what's happening now, and I think it's a very exciting time, is social media. that a book just doesn't go into a store and if it doesn't sell, they return the book and it's over. Social media can do so much to drive a book. We published a book 6 years ago called The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes. It was a picture book about a girl who, she was a good kid. She didn't feel pressured to do good, to be perfect. She just was. And then at the end she messes up and she laughs about it. And it did fine in the fall that we published it. And then the following beginning of July, every week it was selling more and more and more. And it was all coming from Amazon. It was all coming from online sales. And we didn't know what the heck was going on. The author wasn't doing anything. The illustrator, the agent was calling us what we were doing. We couldn't figure it out. And finally someone said, I'm on Pinterest, and everybody's posting it on Pinterest saying, it's back to school time. Your kids are going to feel under all this pressure. This is the perfect book to help with that. And what's happened is that every year we sell more copies of that book than the year before. And every July, beginning of July, there's this huge spike. And we sold almost twice as many this July and August as we did the year before. And it's all coming from social media. So I think rather than giving up per se, figure out how, if we publish this book, how as you or as an illustrator or an author, what can you do to help make the awareness of it out there in social media? I think there are more opportunities to sustain the life of a book. Optimist.
Yeah, definitely.
In Italy, in the last year, push. In Italy, in the last year, small new publishing houses started to work, especially on picture books. So they are small realities, so they don't need big numbers to survive, and they are doing really great things. So I think there is the cultural level and the sensibility of the public is growing, and so there is more space now for this kind of books.
I'm sorry I missed most of the talk, so we probably said this, but what would be the best approach to get commissions? Would that be, I'm sorry, you probably talked a lot about this, but would it be to find an illustration agency, or can you find like the publishing houses and try to write them and try to get them to see your work?
Just make friends with the publishers. This is the best way in Turkey.
It's basically what we've been talking.
Yeah, send a portfolio by email.
Okay, so that might be effective to just try to send your portfolio to all the publishing houses you can get.
It's better if you check before if your style fits with the style of the publishing house
Yeah.
you're contacting.
Okay. Okay.
Really quick suggestion, or we just move on.
Quick suggestion. Who was asking me in the email? Perhaps the two people that has just left, the one of the this association, if could be helpful to put something in the email that you can visualize immediately opening the email without opening the attachment or clicking on the link, something that can suggest who you are, which is your style. So if I can be catch immediately from the beginning, that could be an idea.
Something to add?
I think to reach out to agents and to reach out to publishers, but do study what that publisher publishes or what that agency represents, so that you're not wasting your time or their time by sending something that just wouldn't interest them. I think that's, do your homework.
Okay. Maybe one last question, anyone? No? All right.
So that's very short.
Okay.
Like, is there something that you're missing?
Is there something that you always think, oh, I'm missing this? Maybe there isn't, but maybe there's something you say, I'm missing this kind of tendency or this kind of style or that kind of concepts. Don't know. Maybe not. It's fine.
I would really like.
They are not artists.
No, I would really like to receive something, because usually when you say children, you always think about education. You want always to teach something through a book, and I love when a book speaks to the reader without the intent of teaching anything, and doing this, in reality, it teaches something, but it's not the intent.
Yeah, well, regarding what you just said, I think that maybe there is one question that I wanted to ask is that if do you think that there is a gap or a difference between the illustration that is made for children and the illustration that is made for adults, and if you think that maybe this boundary is fading away or spontaneously, or maybe you are working to include other trends that maybe are more targeted at adults into the children books, maybe?
Are you asking if there is a kind of...
Yeah, if there is one, like a difference, a boundary between...
A boundary? I'm asking this to myself often. Because, well, depends on the target. If you are directing your book to children very, very, very young, I mean from 0 to 2 years old, I think you need the shape and the object to make the children recognize what they're looking at. After at an age, I'm not sure which one, 2, 3, I think that in the brain of the child start developing the abstract way of perceiving and thinking. So from also a cloud of color or something not necessarily representative, he can have a suggestion, and even if he doesn't understand exactly the meaning, he can have suggestion and understand not in a rational way. So I think there is not exactly a boundary between the art. Of course, if also in fiction I have the same problem, and what at the end I concluded is that when it's not violent too much, violent or shocking, it could be for children as much as for adults, even if it's fiction or it is art. So,
All right.
I think this is a children's book, but I can consider it as an adult book as well. This is children's book. I'm sure that you can't consider it as a adult book. You can't do that. But when I took it from the publisher La Galera, they published that, and as far as when I look at that, when I took the book on my hand, when I saw this illustration, some kind of like that, I found it's really we are lack of this kind of illustrations in our daily books, in our adult books, in adult books. So I think maybe this would be a good example, this kind of style. This is my perspective. This could be a good style for adult fiction books, illustrated books.
I was just going to say, I think the boundaries are constantly being broken. When Sendak did Where the Wild Things Are, that was considered outrageous and dangerous, and there were a lot of people who thought that book should not have been published, and yet I don't know how many of you read it, once a year without children. But I look at something like The Invention of Hugo Cabret 10 years ago, which, if for those of you who don't know it, the book alternates between being told between text and illustrations for over 500 pages. And I think that our industry is constantly changing and breaking down boundaries. And I see adults constantly dipping into it, and I don't know that there is a ceiling or anything that's really keeping people from all of this meshing, and certainly we're seeing films being made from these books and crossing over in all areas, so.
Okay, well, this is it then. Thanks a lot for taking part in this roundtable and for sharing your expertise with all of us. Thank you all for coming as well. And well, till next time. Thank you.